The sentence was small and cold, like a key that didn't fit any door I owned. We only invited special people. Lena wrote it with a little heart at the end, as if punctuation could dress rudeness for church. I was standing in my kitchen, steam from the kettle fogging a square on the window, when the news landed. The wedding had happened yesterday, without me, without the mother who held their rent steady for 3 years, who filled a refrigerator that never needed to wonder, who bought the sofa they watch late-night shows on. My son, Max, didn't write. He let her speak for both of them. It's funny how silence can feel like a signature. My name is Renate, 2 syllables my mother used to say like a promise, Renate. I am 71, and my mornings are mostly honest. Water, heat, tea. The cup is heavy and familiar in my hand. The air in the kitchen at that hour has a clean smell, like peeled apples and dish soap trying their best. I keep my papers in a blue folder near the oven mitts because I am too old to climb on chairs for what I need. If you stay with me until the end, I'll tell you how a mother stops being an ATM and becomes a person again, how greed dresses up as concern, how peace isn't quiet until somebody earns it. When I was a girl, the sound of my life was my father's pocketful of screws. He would set them out on a cloth like a silver service, each one ready to fix something that had forgotten itself. My mother sewed hems with a jaw set not from anger but from accuracy. She measured twice, cut once, and said love wasn't a ledger but it did need a budget. We were not wealthy, but the house smelled like starch and soup and dignity. I learned early how to make a table look like abundance. I learned to stretch a stew and a smile. I learned to be useful. I married at 23, a man who laughed from the belly and stood straight when he told the truth. He died before he could become an old man, leaving behind a son with cowlicks that refused to obey and a wife who could fix 1,000 things but not that empty chair. I put grief in the pantry where the sugar used to live and carried on. I worked at a library where I could shelve other people's stories when mine was too heavy. I said yes to extra shifts and no to new dresses and managed to keep us warm. Max was a sweet boy who grew into a man whose hands learned comfort before they learned calluses. He loved big and sometimes forgot that love is not a renewable resource if you never pour it back. When he met Lena, she was bright and declarative. She had opinions about olive oil and opinions about my haircut and opinions about the way I wrapped gifts in brown paper as if Christmas were a grocery bag. I liked her. She made my son happy in the easy ways you can measure. Laughter in the next room, chairs pulled close, 2 pairs of shoes near the door. They moved in together fast. Rent was more than style could cover. Just until we find our footing, Max said, the way people say just as if it makes a sentence small. I paid the difference. Then it was groceries. Then the car insurance. Then a new mattress because sleep is health, Mom. I agreed, sleep is health. And so is not worrying if the light bill will pretend to be late. It added up without looking like it did. That's how sums are. 100 here, 200 there. A will pay you back when the tax return hits never hits. I kept track in my head until the math got dizzy and I stopped, because the mother heart says love first, numbers later. When the subject of their wedding came up, I asked not with a push but a hand on the shoulder of a sentence, have you picked a date yet? Lena smiled and said, not yet, Renate. We'll let you know. Then she let me know, after. We only invited special people. The cup in my hand cooled without asking my permission. Do you know the feeling when a room shifts and you realize the picture on the wall has been crooked for years and you've been tilting your head? I sat at the table and stared at the blue folder as if it were breathing. 3 years of bank transfers labeled help, bridge, just this once. Receipts for furniture stamped with my name, the good kind of permanent that still stings. In the sink, a spoon pinged as if it agreed with me. I didn't answer Lena's message. I didn't call Max to ask for another version of the truth. I turned off the kettle and went for the folder. I put it in a tote bag with a pair in my reading glasses. Then I put on my coat and walked, because walking is the oldest medicine I know. At the end of my street, There's a woman named Mrs. Klein who grows tomatoes in buckets and doesn't apologize for making every conversation about sunlight. She watched me pass and saw something on my face I hadn't decided to feel yet. "Come back by later," she said. "I have cuttings." The world, it turns out, has a way of handing you a handle when your arms are full. The bank sits between a bakery and a shop that sells clothes that pretend to be simple. I went to the window where the manager smiles with her eyes first. "How can I help you, Ms. Renate?" Help. Such a small word. I told her I needed to review every auto pay, every transfer, every permission that thinks it belongs to me. I watched her face as she read the screen. Her mouth got straighter. She called someone in a back office with a tidy clock. "We'll print it," she said, and paper like the beginning of a storm slid out at her elbow. I recognized my generosity, disguised as someone else's entitlement. On the way home, I stopped by Mrs. Klein's gate. She handed me a small pot with a bit of green bravely introducing itself to the air. "Rosemary," she said. "It remembers who it is no matter who forgets to water it. Rub the leaves, remind yourself." I did. The smell was clean and stubborn. I carried that little plant and the folder to my kitchen table and set them down like they could talk to each other. If any part of this sounds like your house, tell me the one small thing you keep nearby when you need to steady your hands. A sprig of rosemary. A photo. A word. Leave it in the comments so a stranger has something to borrow tonight. And if you want me to keep talking, if you want to hear how a mother becomes a woman who can stand up in a courthouse and not shake, subscribe. Not for numbers. For company. The morning after the not-invited wedding, I put on my good sweater because my grandmother taught me that courage likes a collar. I called a woman named Asha Patel, an attorney whose card I'd kept in a drawer with rubber bands and postage stamps and a key to something I no longer own. She had helped a friend's aunt when a nephew tried to move money around like chess pieces. "Bring what you have," Ms. Patel said, her voice made of oaken tea. "We'll sort." Her office smelled faintly of lemons and paper, the way reassurance should. She didn't rush me. She let me tell the story in the order my heart remembered it. Then she made her own list, neat and practical, with checkboxes that looked like confidence: freeze credit, update passwords, revoke any powers you never granted, review title, write a letter to yourself, dated and signed, describing what you understand and what you choose. "I have been feeding a problem," I wrote at her desk, my hand steadier than it deserved to be. "Effective today, I will feed myself." She nodded. "Now, banks," she said. We called the security departments and answered their questions in voices that did not apologize. We flagged every account that had learned my son's birthday better than I should have let. We set up alerts pinging my phone like small bells: any attempt to move money, to apply for credit, to add a name that isn't mine, call me, call Ms. Patel, call the son to witness. At the title office, a woman with hair the color of salt read my deed out loud as if the document needed to hear itself. "Owner of record, Renate, surname, fee simple," she said, like a hymn. We searched for liens and found none. We looked for instruments prepared and not recorded, the kind of paper that waits until you aren't looking. Nothing yet. It was a relief heavy enough to sit down. Back home, the afternoon smelled like rain thinking about itself. I made soup, onion and potato, the poor woman's friend, and practiced saying no in a mirror. No with warmth. No with clarity. No with a smile that means nothing but kindness for the person wearing it. The phone buzzed. "Max, Mom, you've been acting strange. We need to talk about finances. Lena thinks you might be overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. A generous word when used correctly. A weapon when used wrong. I wrote back, "Everything is fine. And private." He didn't respond. Sometimes silence is your ally, if you let it be. Days passed in small victories. I slept all the way to morning twice. I walked around the block without rehearsing conversations in my head. I went to the library and shelved returns like lining up soldiers who forgot their gentle. I rubbed the rosemary between my fingers and filled the house with its readiness. Then things shifted. Panic has a sound, and it is footsteps where they don't belong. They came to my door at 9 on a Thursday, Max and Lena and a man who introduced himself as their attorney, though his tie looked tired and his briefcase was the kind that eats paper. Lena spoke first, as if sentences were stairs and she needed to prove her legs worked. "We're concerned," she said. "You've been making strange decisions. We think you need someone to help you manage your affairs." She looked around my kitchen like a realtor, cataloging secrets I didn't have. Max didn't meet my eyes. I did not invite them in. I stood with the door chain across, a small length of steel that felt like a fence around a garden. "I have an attorney," I said. "Her name is Asha Patel. If you have concerns, send them to her." The man cleared his throat and spoke of capacity as if it were a thing he could weigh on my bathroom scale. He said words like guardianship and conservator and safe, the way you say sugar and mean anesthetic. "We'll be filing," he said, like a person announcing a parade. "We hope you'll be reasonable." Reasonable has done such heavy lifting in my life I want to buy it a chair. When they left, my hands shook with the energy a body releases when it doesn't have to be polite anymore. I sat down and called Miss Patel. "She didn't say I told you," she said, deep breath. "We prepare." We scheduled a full capacity evaluation with my physician, Dr. Kim, who has eyes that see weather systems in a person and hands that lay gently on truths. We gathered documentation, my bills paid on time, my medication list with check marks, my grocery receipts lined up by date like good schoolchildren. I wrote a statement, clear, dated, signed, about my daily routine, my understanding of my finances, my choices going forward. Miss Patel requested a neuropsych evaluation, not because we needed permission to be ourselves, but because paper speaks loudly in rooms where doubt is currency. When the petition arrived, a thick sheaf that smelled like toner and nerve, it suggested I was confused, lonely, manipulable. It swore someone had seen me hand over a check to a stranger in a parking lot. I had not, that I left the stove on, I did not, that I seemed paranoid about money, I was prudent, finally. The attached exhibits were my own generosity, rebranded as incompetence. Miss Patel read every line and said, "Greed has excellent handwriting." Then she showed me the law, not like a cudgel but like a fence diagram. "There are requirements," she said. "Evidence, capacity standards, due process. We will make the truth legible." I told Mrs. Klein over the fence, and she shook her head so hard her clip fell out and her hair became a sermon. "We've all seen how you keep your accounts," she said. "We'll tell it." My neighbor Jamal, who teaches high school civics and has a voice like a bell, offered to testify to how many times I've fixed his printer and organized his utility budget with a pencil and pancakes. May from down the hall brought a Tupperware of dumplings and said, "People think old means soft. Show teeth." We laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter is a tool that remembers other jobs. If you're listening and your name has ever been invited to a courtroom without your consent, tell me one thing you did to remember yourself. A phrase. A ritual. A smell. Put it below. Someone who is scared will read it and sleep better. If you want to walk into that courthouse with me next, subscribe so we don't lose each other in the crowd. I promise we will walk out again. Courthouses are strange churches. The benches squeak. The air breathes through grates. People wear their best clothes and the worst parts of their stories. The day of the hearing, I wore the jacket my husband loved because it made me stand straighter than sadness allowed. Ms. Patel met me at the steps with a folder the size of a loaf of bread and a smile that said, "Let's go tell the truth somewhere formal." In the small capacity courtroom, time does a different math. The judge looked the way authority should, tired, kind, allergic to nonsense. Max and Lena sat at a table with their attorney, who had a new tie. Lena cried with her hands, fluttering and arranging, her face performing concern. Max looked like a boy who'd been told the ocean would move aside for him if he asked nicely. I tried not to hate them. Hate stains the teacup and never really washes out. Their lawyer began. He used phrases that make people nervous: vulnerable adult, undue influence, risk. He implied I was under the sway of a new friend. He meant Ms. Patel, who had isolated me from my family. He pointed to 3 months of fewer transfers and called it erratic choices. He held up an unsigned draft of a power of attorney they'd prepared for my safety. He said they sued to protect me. Protect. Ms. Patel stood with her folder and the kind of posture you can lean on. She spoke simply. She introduced the capacity evaluation from Dr. Kim: baseline memory fine, decision-making intact, no signs of cognitive impairment. She introduced my neuropsych report, scores that would make a guidance counselor smile. She introduced bank records that showed 3 years of consistent financial support from me to them, followed by a modest, deliberate reduction when I set boundaries. She introduced screenshots of texts, my no and their be reasonable, and the wedding message with its little heart. She introduced my letter to myself, dated, signed, my paid bills, my medication list, my grocery lists with notes like "buy jam for Jamal." She had me testify to my daily rhythms: wake, tea, walk, library on Tuesdays, community garden on Fridays, church on Sundays if I don't feel contrary. She asked me to explain what a conservatorship is. I did. She asked me why I didn't want one. I said because my name still fits in my mouth and my pen still knows my hand. Neighbors spoke. Mrs. Klein told the court about my rosemary and my habit of reading price tags like poetry. Jamal described my printer repairs and budget lessons. May spoke about my dumpling debt ledger, a joke that became a little community economy. Dr. Kim, calm as a good morning, told the judge I was as competent as anyone else in the room, and possibly more consistent in my sodium intake. When it was his turn, Max didn't look at me. He talked about worry. He said things like, "She's my mother," as if the word gave him a pass into my accounts. He cried once, a short sound like a door in wind. Lena whispered to their attorney, who objected to the hope in Ms. Patel's tone. The judge overruled hope. When Ms. Patel cross-examined, she asked Max to name my medications. He couldn't. She asked him my rent amount. He guessed and missed by $100. She asked him the last time he looked in my refrigerator. He said last month, but it was the week after he borrowed my car and left it with the gas light on. Near the end, the judge leant forward. He spoke to me directly. "Miss Surname, do you understand what a conservatorship is?" "Yes." "Do you want one?" "No." "What will you do with your finances going forward?" "Keep them mine. Keep them simple. Keep a ledger where everyone pays for their own groceries." The judge nodded, and in that nod was a blessing. He denied the petition. He said words like unfounded and insufficient evidence. He cautioned Max and Lena about the purpose of the law, that it is not a crowbar for inheritance, not an eraser for a mother's autonomy. He asked them to consider apologies. He did not order them. Judges are not in the apology business. They are in the business of not letting the wolf guard the sheep. We walked out into air that felt unseasonably kind. Ms. Patel squeezed my shoulder. "Now we build the fence higher," she said, "but we plant flowers on your side." On the courthouse steps, a woman I didn't know stopped me. "I was in there," she said. "I have a daughter like your Lena. I'm going to call your Ms. Patel." We stood together a moment like strangers at the same window when it's raining. "Do," I said. "Bring your rosemary." I did not go home right away. I went to the river and sat on a bench warmed by a sun that doesn't take sides. I watched water negotiate with stones. I breathed like a person whose lungs had been returned. Then I did a quiet thing I recommend to anyone who has been dragged into a room where they did not belong. I bought a pastry, ate it slowly, and let my body learn the taste of safety. If you are walking out of your own courthouse soon, literal or otherwise, Tell me what pastry you'll buy, what small, sweet proof you'll use to teach your body the door stayed open when you walked through. Share it below. If this is the part where you needed the story to stay with you, subscribe so you don't have to look for me again. I'll be on the bench with the rosemary on my wrist. I thought winning would be an ending. It was the beginning of the part where I lived on my own terms. I changed the locks even though no paper required it. I put a small camera above the door, mostly to make my niece laugh at the parade of delivery men and one raccoon. I cleaned my kitchen deeply, not because it was dirty, but because some rooms deserve a new story. I gave away the sofa I'd bought for their living room, a good sofa that sat stiff as a jury, and found a chair that fits my back like a friend. I planted the rosemary in a pot by the window where it drinks morning. My days found their dignity. Tuesdays at the library, where I shelve romance paperbacks and pretend not to read their last lines. Wednesdays with May at the market, arguing over which greens look like they might have known the sun. Fridays at the community garden, where Jamal teases me for talking to the tomatoes and I tell him tomatoes respond to good grammar. Sundays when I feel like it, at a church where the choir knows the difference between volume and praise. Afternoons, sometimes, in a small studio above a laundromat, taking a balance class with 20 other people who have decided dignity includes ankles. The phone still played the old tune occasionally. Max asked for a conversation to clear the air. Lena sent a request from her lawyer for mediation regarding support you previously promised. Ms. Patel answered those with letters that sounded like polite doorbells ringing on a house no one lives in anymore. Clear, brief, decent. I wrote to Max separately, once. I love you, I said. From here. I explained here with a map of words, no money, no documents, no errands for your emergencies. Yes to kindness when you can speak kindly. Yes to seeing my grandson at the library with 2 librarians as chaperones and a pile of dinosaurs supervising. Shock is loud. Grief is a weather pattern. Peace is a practice. I learned to wake and name 3 things that cannot be argued. The mug is warm, the plant is green, the morning light is better than yesterday's. I learned to say no without adding a paragraph. I learned to let guilt ring the doorbell until it got bored and walked away. There were good surprises. A postcard from a woman who'd sat in the courtroom behind us. I called Ms. Patel. She says hi. A bag of lemons from Mrs. Klein with a note, make something tart as truth. A folded flyer on the library bulletin board, Silver Hour, women over 60 who like to tell the truth slowly. I went once and found a circle of hands set gently in their laps, a table with cinnamon cookies, a rule that comforted me, no fixing. We took turns saying the name of the person who had made our life both bigger and harder. We practiced sentences with a period at the end. We practiced sighing without apologizing for needing air. One afternoon, after balance class, I found Lena waiting outside my building. She wore a coat that cost more than a week of groceries and a face like a holiday card. She stepped forward with a hug I didn't owe her and began to cry the way you cry when your audience is a mirror. We were scared, she said. We thought you'd make bad choices. We thought you'd give everything away. I thought of the 3 years my money had been their air conditioner and their Netflix and the cushion beneath their cushions. I thought of the wedding I learned about in a text. I thought of the word special. I believe you were scared, I said. I believe you made choices. I am making mine. She asked if money meant more to me than family. People like this like to put money and love on opposite sides of the scale, as if you can only have one without the other. No, I said. Money is how we respect the hours of a life. Love is how we spend them. Don't use one to steal the other. She asked if we could start over. I told her starting over would require the kind of apology that begins before the mouth and lives after the sentence. She blinked. I'm sorry you feel hurt, she said, a classic of the non-apology genre. I'm not, I said. Feeling hurt saved me. I didn't tell Max she came. If he wants to do brave things, he'll do them without a scout. I went upstairs and made lemon bars that tasted like decisions, and wrapped a plate for silver hour. If you're still with me, tell me one boundary you kept this year that people didn't clap for and you kept anyway. Write it in one line. You might be loaning out a spine. If this kind of story helps, subscribe so we can keep the kettle on. There's room at the table for the careful and the tired and the brave. In the end, peace was not silence. It was a house with ordinary noises, refrigerator hum, kettle sigh, leaves tapping the window like a polite neighbor, where none of the sounds were my own heart racing. It was opening the blue folder and finding only the papers I chose to keep. It was going a whole week without explaining myself to anyone who wasn't an orange cat or a tomato vine. Max and I have a new kind of contact now, thin as a postcard and sturdier than the old kind. We meet at the library sometimes, where the children's section forgives adult sorrow like a generous aunt. My grandson runs to me with the kind of joy that makes you forget your knees. We read about trucks and moons. We stack blocks like the architects of small countries. When he asks, as children do, why Oma didn't go to the wedding, I say, grown-ups forgot how to be gentle, and we practice with blocks, careful hands, steady walls, fair turns. I do not buy anything but snacks and used books and the kind of stickers that look like constellations on a lunchbox. Will I forgive? I already have, in the way that lets me sleep and does not unlock a single door. Forgiveness is for my pillow. Justice is for my paperwork. Future is for my mornings. I pray, not for them to feel what I felt, but for them to become people who stop mistaking love for access. I pray for the strangers who sat in that courtroom and recognized themselves, who will dial numbers and say, my name fits in my mouth, please help me keep it. I went to the clerk's office last week and filed a small, unremarkable thing, a will that says in plain language where my things will land. Mrs. Klein will get a cat she pretends she doesn't want. Jamal will get the recipe book with the page for pancakes laminated by life. May will get the teapot that pours without judgment. The rest will go where it should, a charity that buys backpacks for children who pretend not to care and do, a fund for women who want an attorney before they need one. Max will get a letter. In it I wrote, I loved you beyond my means. I learned. May you learn too. After I left the clerk, I walked to the river and let the wind comb my hair. I thought about the wedding I didn't attend and the life I finally did. I thought about the phrase special people and understood that I am one, to myself. I am special to the tea that tastes better when I sit down. I am special to the book that waits for me to turn the page. I am special to this rosemary that insists on being itself no matter how many times the day forgets to water it. I am special to the bench that remembers my shape. If this long, quiet story put a hand on your back and helped you stand up straighter in your own kitchen, leave one word in the comments so the next person knows where to sit. Here. Enough. Starting. Tell us one practice that keeps you yours. And if you want to keep this little circle lit, subscribe. Not for a crowd. For company. For the relief of hearing someone say what you've lived, in a voice that neither shouts nor shakes. At night, I rinse the cup, set it upside down to dry, check the lock without apology. I rub the rosemary between my fingers and inhale the truth it carries. I speak 3 facts into the room and listen to the room agree. The cup is warm. The plant is green. The light is kind. I add a 4th because I can, my name belongs to me. I am Renate. I rebuilt my life. I am at peace.